They tell themselves they're moving on. They try to distract their mind, fill their days, and silence your memory. Yet somehow, no matter how hard they try, they keep finding their way back to the thought of you. What if the connection you feel is not wishful thinking, but evidence of something much deeper? What if the reason you cannot fully let go of your specific person is the same reason they cannot fully let go of you? This message is about understanding the unseen power of consciousness, assumption, and emotional imprint. Because when two realities become intertwined in imagination, forgetting is no longer a simple choice. Tonight, you may discover why your presence remains alive within them, even when they try their hardest to escape it. I've written the expansion in a reusable draft block, so you can directly use it in your script. Let me invite you to consider something that most people never truly understand. They believe memories are stored only in the mind, as though they are fragile things that fade with time, distance, or distraction. They assume that if someone tries hard enough, they can simply forget. But have you ever noticed how certain people remain unforgettable? Have you ever wondered why one face, one voice, one presence can linger in the heart long after every logical reason for remembering has disappeared? The answer is far deeper than most imagine. What is impressed upon consciousness does not vanish simply because someone decides it should. What is felt deeply becomes part of one's inner reality, and inner reality is always more powerful than appearances. You see, people often believe that forgetting is an act of will. They tell themselves, I need to move on. I need to stop thinking about this person. I need to put the past behind me. Yet the very effort to forget keeps the memory alive. Every attempt to push something away gives it attention. Every effort to silence a thought quietly acknowledges its existence. That is why some people find themselves thinking about someone at the most unexpected moments. They may be busy with work. They may be surrounded by friends. They may be focused on entirely different things. And suddenly, without warning, a memory appears, a feeling returns, a familiar image enters the mind. Not because they invited it, but because what was impressed upon consciousness continues to live there. When two people share a meaningful emotional experience, something greater than a simple memory is created. An impression is formed, and impressions do not obey the rules of time in the way people believe they do. You must understand this. The outer world may suggest separation. The calendar may suggest distance. Circumstances may appear unchanged. Yet consciousness is not bound by any of these things. What has been accepted within continues to exist within. This is why there are moments when someone suddenly remembers a person they have not spoken to in months. This is why a name enters their thoughts for no apparent reason. This is why they hear a song, pass a familiar place, or experience a simple moment of silence, and instantly the memory returns with surprising intensity. The world calls it coincidence. But there is something much deeper taking place. The inner man never forgets what has been emotionally accepted as real. And if your specific person shared moments with you that carried emotional meaning, those moments did not simply disappear. They became part of the invisible landscape of consciousness. Now, many people become discouraged because they judge everything by appearances. They say, if they truly remembered me, they would already be here. But appearances are often the last thing to change. The unseen always comes first. A seed grows beneath the soil long before it becomes visible above the ground. In the same way, consciousness is always active beneath the surface. Long before actions change, long before words are spoken, long before circumstances rearrange themselves, the deeper reality is already moving. And what makes this understanding so powerful is that it shifts your attention away from fear. You no longer have to wonder whether you have been completely forgotten. You no longer have to imagine that your existence has vanished from their awareness. Instead, you begin to recognize that what was truly planted within consciousness cannot simply be erased because someone wishes it away for a day, a week, or even a season. For what is accepted deeply enough becomes part of their inner world, and the inner world is always shaping the experiences that follow, continuing seamlessly from key point one. And this is where many people misunderstand what is happening when distance enters the picture. They assume that distance weakens a connection. They believe that silence means the feeling is disappearing. They look at the absence of communication and conclude that the bond must be fading. Yet if you observe human nature carefully, you will discover that the opposite is often true. There are people who are physically present every day and barely cross our minds. Then there are those who are nowhere to be seen, and yet they occupy entire conversations within our imagination. Their absence somehow magnifies their presence. Why does this happen? Because consciousness does not measure connection by physical proximity. It measures it through meaning. What carries emotional significance continues to live within the inner world, whether the person is standing beside you or living thousands of miles away. In fact, when someone attempts to create distance in order to forget, they often become more aware of what they are trying to escape. Imagine a person deciding that they will no longer think about someone. They convince themselves that they are moving forward. They remove reminders. They focus on other activities. They tell friends they are finished with the situation. Outwardly, everything appears settled. Yet something curious begins to happen. The silence creates space, and in that space, thoughts that were once drowned out by distractions become easier to hear. Moments arrive when there is nothing demanding their attention. No conversation, no noise, no activity pulling them in a different direction. And suddenly they become aware of feelings they thought they had left behind. The heart has a way of speaking most clearly when the world becomes quiet. This is why silence can be so powerful. Many people fear silence because they interpret it as rejection. They imagine that if they are not hearing from their specific person, then nothing is happening. But inner movement is rarely visible from the outside. Some of the deepest transformations occur in complete stillness. A seed beneath the ground makes no announcement as it grows. No one hears it, no one sees it, yet life is unfolding. The same principle applies within consciousness. Sometimes what appears to be an activity is actually a period of internal reorganization. Old assumptions begin to loosen. Old emotional defenses begin to weaken. Thoughts that were pushed away begin returning with greater frequency. And because there is no longer constant interaction to distract the mind, the emotional significance of the connection often becomes clearer. People begin remembering details they once overlooked. Small moments suddenly feel important. Conversations replay themselves in unexpected ways. They find themselves wondering about possibilities they previously ignored. Not because someone is forcing these thoughts into their mind, but because consciousness naturally returns to what carries meaning. Have you ever noticed how certain experiences become more valuable after they are gone? While they are present, they can be taken for granted. But once distance is introduced, their true importance begins to reveal itself. The same thing can happen within relationships. What seemed ordinary suddenly feels extraordinary. What seemed replaceable suddenly feels unique. What seemed easy to dismiss becomes difficult to stop thinking about. And so the very silence that appears threatening from the outside may be creating a deeper awareness within. This is why you must be careful not to judge your reality by appearances alone. The outer world shows effects. Consciousness contains causes. When you become obsessed with what is visible, you overlook the invisible movements that eventually produce visible results. The person who appears distant may be experiencing an entirely different reality internally. The person who says nothing may be having conversations within themselves that no one else can hear. The person who seems determined to move on may be discovering that every attempt to create separation only brings greater awareness of what still remains alive within them. And this leads us to another profound truth that most people never recognize. The harder someone tries to push a meaningful connection out of their mind, the more attention they unknowingly give to it. And attention has a remarkable way of keeping an experience active within consciousness. I'll continue the script seamlessly from the previous section. Consider for a moment how the mind actually works. Most people believe that forgetting is accomplished by force. They imagine that if they are determined enough, disciplined enough, or distracted enough, they can simply remove someone from their thoughts. Yet the mind does not respond well to force. The very act of resisting a thought often gives that thought new life. Think about it. The moment someone says, "I must stop thinking about this person," they have already brought that person into awareness. Before they can reject the thought, they must first acknowledge it. Before they can push it away, they must first focus on it. And in focusing on it, even for a moment, they reactivate the very thing they are trying to leave behind. This is one of the great paradoxes of consciousness. What you fight, you continue to energize. What you constantly resist remains active in your awareness. And so a person may sincerely believe they are moving away from a connection, while unknowingly feeding it with their attention every single day. Perhaps they wake up and tell themselves they are done thinking about you. Yet in making that declaration, your image passes through their mind. They promise themselves they will focus on something else. Yet they compare new experiences to the ones they shared with you. They meet new people. Yet certain qualities remind them of you. They hear a phrase, they see a place, they experience a familiar emotion. And once again, without intending to, they find themselves revisiting a memory they thought had already faded. You see, consciousness is not impressed by words alone. It responds to attention. Wherever attention goes, energy follows. Whatever receives repeated attention gains a stronger foothold within the inner world. This is why some memories disappear quickly, while others seem almost impossible to erase. The memories that carry emotional weight continue returning because they are connected to something deeper than simple recollection. They are attached to feelings, meanings, and assumptions that remain alive beneath the surface. A person may convince themselves they no longer care. But if the feeling remains unresolved, consciousness continues bringing it forward, not to punish them, not to torment them, but because the inner world is always seeking expression. What has not been fully released tends to revisit awareness again and again. And this explains why some people become frustrated by their own thoughts. They cannot understand why a certain person keeps appearing in their mind. They believe enough time has passed. They believe they should be over it by now, yet the thought continues returning in unexpected moments. The reason is simple. The connection exists on a deeper level than they realize. The conscious mind may wish to move in one direction, while the deeper levels of awareness continue holding on to what has been accepted as meaningful and real. Now understand this carefully. You are not being asked to obsess over whether someone is thinking about you every moment of the day. That is not the point. The point is to recognize the nature of consciousness itself. The inner world does not operate according to the rules of logic that people often impose upon it. Feelings leave impressions. Impressions influence thoughts. Thoughts return to awareness. And awareness continues revisiting whatever carries significance. This is why trying to force forgetting often produces the opposite effect. The mind circles back, the memory reappears. The feeling resurfaces, and every attempt to push it away becomes another moment of contact with it. What began as an effort to create separation quietly becomes a reminder of the connection itself. The individual may never speak these things aloud. They may never reveal the conversations taking place within them. To the outside world, they may appear completely unaffected. Yet appearances reveal very little about what is happening beneath the surface. For beneath every visible action exists an invisible self-concept, and it is that inner identity that ultimately determines how someone continues to experience another person, whether they realize it or not. This is where we must look beyond their thoughts and begin examining your own. For while many people spend endless hours wondering what their specific person is thinking, very few stop to ask a far more important question. Who am I being in relation to this relationship? The answer to that question changes everything. You see, the world is constantly reflecting back the assumptions you hold about yourself. Not the assumptions you occasionally repeat, but the ones you consistently accept as true. The ones that feel natural. The ones that shape your identity when no one is watching. If you see yourself as someone who is easily forgotten, abandoned, replaced, or overlooked, then you are unconsciously giving life to that experience within your inner world. And because consciousness always seeks expression, the outer world begins reflecting those assumptions back to you in different forms. But if you begin to see yourself differently, something remarkable happens. If you start viewing yourself as unforgettable, as valuable, as deeply loved, as someone whose presence leaves a lasting impression, then the entire experience begins to change. Not because you forced another person to think differently, not because you manipulated circumstances, but because you altered the concept of yourself from which all experiences flow. Most people do the opposite. They make another person the center of their reality. They constantly ask, do they miss me? Do they love me? Are they thinking about me? And while those questions seem harmless, they often place power outside the self. They suggest that another person's thoughts determine your value. Yet your value was never meant to be determined by another person's behavior. Your value originates within. The moment you understand this, you stop chasing evidence and begin creating it. You stop looking at appearances as though they are the source of reality. You recognize them as reflections of deeper assumptions. Imagine standing before a mirror and demanding that the reflection smile first. It would be impossible. The reflection can only mirror what stands before it. Life operates according to the same principle. The outer world mirrors the inner concept of self. And so when you accept yourself as someone who is cherished, remembered, desired, and chosen, you begin projecting a completely different state of consciousness. People often underestimate the power of this shift. They think self-concept is merely positive thinking. It is far more than that. Self-concept is identity. It is the lens through which you interpret every experience. It determines what feels natural to you. It determines what you expect, and what you consistently expect becomes the framework through which consciousness expresses itself. When you truly know your worth, you no longer spend every day worrying about whether someone has forgotten you. You no longer need constant reassurance. You no longer react to temporary appearances. Instead, you become anchored in a deeper knowing. You understand that someone who has experienced your energy, your presence, your love, and your significance cannot simply erase that impression because a few circumstances changed. The version of you that exists within their awareness is heavily influenced by the version of you that exists within your own awareness. This is why inner transformation is always more powerful than outer effort. People try to change relationships by changing actions. They try harder. They say more, they do more, they force more. Yet the greatest shift occurs when they change the way they see themselves. Because the moment your self-concept changes, you begin occupying a new state. And from that new state, different thoughts emerge, different emotions emerge, different expectations emerge. Even your presence feels different. You become less attached to fear and more aligned with certainty, less focused on loss, and more focused on fulfillment. And when this happens consistently, the image you continue to hold of both yourself and your specific person starts becoming stronger than the old story that once seemed so real. For consciousness always moves toward the image that receives the most acceptance, and the image you repeatedly accept has a way of shaping not only how you see them, but eventually how they show up within your experience. Now this brings us to one of the most powerful ideas you can ever understand. Most people believe they are reacting to the version of their specific person that exists in front of them. They observe current circumstances, recent actions, or present behavior, and they allow those things to determine what they believe is possible. But the truth is that every relationship is experienced first within consciousness before it is experienced in the outer world. What you consistently accept as true about another person becomes the lens through which you continue to encounter them. Think about how often people unknowingly keep old versions of others alive. Someone makes a mistake years ago, and that mistake becomes their permanent identity in the minds of those who witnessed it. Someone disappoints them once, and they continue expecting disappointment. Someone becomes distant for a season, and they begin defining that person as permanently unavailable. Without realizing it, they continue feeding the same image. They continue returning to the same story. And then they wonder why nothing changes. The outer world can only reflect the state that is most consistently occupied. This is why it is so important to become aware of the version of your specific person you are entertaining within yourself. Are you seeing someone who is confused? Someone who is running away? Someone who is forgetting you? Someone who is incapable of choosing you? Or are you seeing someone who is awakening to their feelings? Someone who recognizes your value? Someone who feels drawn back to you, no matter how much they try to resist it? Someone who realizes that what they have been searching for has been in front of them all along. You must understand that every assumption carries creative power. The image you repeatedly return to does not remain idle within consciousness. It begins shaping expectations. It influences perception. It creates emotional reactions. And over time, it starts forming the blueprint through which reality organizes itself. Many people unknowingly sabotage themselves because they keep revisiting the version of their specific person they wish to leave behind. They say they want love, but they keep imagining rejection. They say they want commitment, but they keep replaying abandonment. They say they want communication, but they continue dwelling on silence. In doing so, they remain emotionally connected to an old version of the story. And because they continue energizing that version, it appears to persist. But the moment you become loyal to a new vision, everything begins shifting. Not overnight. Not through force, but through persistence. You stop asking whether the new version is real. You begin treating it as reality within consciousness. You start seeing your specific person differently. You stop defining them by temporary circumstances. You stop making their past behavior the final authority. You begin relating to the version of them that aligns with your fulfilled desire. This is where true faith begins. Faith is not hoping something changes someday. Faith is remaining loyal to an unseen reality until it becomes visible. Consider a gardener planting a seed. The gardener does not dig up the soil every morning to check if growth is happening. The gardener trusts the process. Water is given, attention is given, expectation is maintained, and eventually what was invisible becomes visible. The same principle applies here. Every time you choose the version of your specific person who loves you, values you, remembers you, and desires connection with you, you strengthen that state within consciousness. Every time you refuse to return to the old story, you weaken its influence. Every time you persist in the new assumption, you move further away from the version that once caused you pain. Remember what we have already explored. The connection remained alive within consciousness. Distance did not erase it. Silence often intensified awareness of it. Attempts to forget only reactivated attention toward it. Your own self-concept began changing the entire experience. And now all of those elements converge into something extraordinary. For when you consistently see someone through the eyes of fulfillment rather than fear, you are no longer reacting to circumstances. You are participating in creation itself. You are choosing which version receives your energy, your belief, and your attention. And the version that receives those gifts most consistently becomes the one that gradually gains reality within your experience, even while unseen movements are already taking place beneath the surface of the visible world. And this is precisely the point where many people lose faith. They have begun changing themselves internally. They have started releasing the old story. They are becoming more conscious of their assumptions. They are learning to see both themselves and their specific person from a different state of mind. Yet they look into the outer world and find no immediate confirmation. The phone remains silent. The circumstances appear unchanged. The visible facts seem exactly as they were before. And because they cannot yet see movement, they assume no movement exists. But that assumption comes from trusting appearances more than consciousness. The truth is that every transformation begins invisibly. Before a tree emerges from the earth, an entire process unfolds beneath the surface. Before dawn appears on the horizon, the world is already moving toward morning. Before a flower blooms, changes are taking place that no eye can detect. Life itself teaches this principle everywhere. The most important movements often occur long before they become visible. Why should consciousness be any different? People expect evidence first, and transformation second. Yet reality unfolds in the opposite direction. Transformation comes first. Evidence follows. What you are seeing externally is always a delayed reflection of inner states that have already been accepted. This is why patience is not merely waiting. Patience is confidence in an unseen process. When you truly understand consciousness, you stop demanding immediate proof. You recognize that invisible movement is still movement, and there is far more happening within your specific person's inner world than appearances may suggest. Consider someone who has spent weeks, months, or even years operating from one set of assumptions. Perhaps they convinced themselves they needed distance. Perhaps they focused on reasons something could not work. Perhaps they built emotional walls around themselves. Those assumptions did not form overnight. And because they did not form overnight, they rarely dissolve overnight. Yet once a new impression begins entering consciousness, subtle shifts start occurring. A thought appears that was not there before. A memory returns with unexpected intensity. A question arises. A feeling surfaces. A certainty they once held begins weakening. They may not even understand why these things are happening. They simply experience them. The conscious mind often tries to explain everything logically, but deeper levels of awareness are constantly responding to assumptions, emotions, and impressions. This is why someone can appear completely unchanged externally while experiencing significant movement internally. They may still behave the same way. They may still say the same things. They may still maintain the same distance. Yet beneath those appearances, old beliefs are losing strength. New possibilities are gaining ground. And because these processes are internal, they remain invisible until enough momentum has been built to produce visible effects. Many people become discouraged because they judge progress only through physical evidence. They treat reality as though the only thing that matters is what they can immediately observe. But consciousness does not work that way. The unseen always precedes the seen. The cause always comes before the effect. The inner world always moves before the outer world responds. This is why your task is not to monitor every circumstance. Your task is to remain faithful to the reality you have accepted within. The moment you begin searching constantly for proof, you shift your attention away from creation and back toward doubt. You start asking whether it is working. You start measuring progress. You start analyzing every detail. And in doing so, you temporarily forget the very principle that brought you this far. The inner world creates the outer world, not the other way around. If you truly believe that your specific person is trying to forget you and failing, then understand what that implies. It implies movement. It implies internal conflict. It implies awareness. It implies that something remains active within consciousness despite appearances. And whenever something remains active within consciousness, it continues influencing thoughts, emotions, perceptions, and eventually actions. The visible world may seem quiet for a season. The evidence may appear absent. The circumstances may appear frozen. But stillness is not the same as inactivity. Many of the most important changes occur in silence. Many of the most powerful transformations occur behind the scenes. And when enough internal movement has taken place, the invisible process reaches a point where it can no longer remain hidden, because consciousness has a natural tendency to express outwardly what has already become accepted inwardly. And this brings us to the point where everything we have discussed begins to unite into a single realization. The connection remained alive within consciousness. Distance did not destroy it. Silence often intensified awareness of it. Attempts to forget only brought attention back to it. Your self-concept influenced the way the entire experience unfolded. The version of your specific person you consistently accepted began shaping your reality. Invisible changes started occurring long before physical evidence appeared. Now there is only one thing left that can continue delaying the fulfillment of what you desire: doubt. Not because doubt has power of its own, but because doubt divides your attention. One moment you are living in the assumption that you are loved. The next moment you are questioning whether it is possible. One moment you feel certain. The next moment you are searching for evidence. One moment you are standing in the reality of your wish fulfilled. The next moment you are returning to the old story. And this constant movement between two states creates confusion within your experience. Imagine planting a seed and then digging it up every day to check whether it is growing. The seed itself is not the problem. The problem is the lack of trust in the process. Many people do this with their desires. They imagine the relationship. They feel the reality of being chosen. They experience moments of genuine certainty. Then a circumstance appears that contradicts what they want. And immediately they abandon the state they were occupying. They return to fear. They return to waiting. They return to wondering whether anything is happening. But consciousness responds to what is consistently accepted, not what is occasionally entertained. The moment you stop doubting is not powerful because the world suddenly decides to reward you. It is powerful because you finally stop interfering with the process you already set into motion. You stop sending mixed signals to your own consciousness. You stop building with one hand and tearing down with the other. You stop treating your desire as something uncertain and begin relating to it as something real. Think about how differently you would feel if you knew with absolute certainty that your specific person could never truly forget you. How would you think? How would you react? Would you spend hours analyzing every circumstance? Would you panic over temporary silence? Would you fear every delay? Of course not. You would feel calmer, more secure, more grounded. You would stop trying to force outcomes because you would trust what is already unfolding. And that inner shift is what changes everything. The outer world is always responding to states of consciousness. When you remain in doubt, you continue experiencing reality through the lens of uncertainty. When you remain in faith, you begin experiencing reality through the lens of fulfillment. The difference is profound. One state keeps asking questions. The other state rests in knowing. One state constantly seeks proof. The other state becomes the proof. One state waits for reality to change first. The other understands that reality changes because consciousness changed first. This is why certainty is so transformative. Not certainty based on visible evidence, not certainty based on current circumstances, but certainty based on your understanding of who you are and how consciousness operates. The person who understands this no longer becomes shaken by appearances. They recognize that appearances are temporary. States are creative. Assumptions are powerful. And persistence eventually produces expression. They stop measuring progress every day. They stop wondering whether they are remembered. They stop questioning whether the connection still exists. Instead, they occupy the state of already being valued, already being chosen, already being unforgettable. And from that state, something remarkable happens. The emotional struggle begins disappearing. The neediness begins dissolving. The fear starts losing its grip. For the first time, they are no longer trying to convince themselves. They know. And there is a tremendous difference between hoping and knowing. Hope looks toward the future. Knowing feels complete in the present. The moment you arrive at that inner certainty, you are no longer chasing the fulfillment of your desire. You are living from it. You are identifying with it. You are accepting it as part of your reality. And when consciousness fully accepts a thing as true, it inevitably begins arranging people, events, circumstances, and experiences into perfect alignment with the state that has finally become natural within you. I've written a strong concluding section you can use as the final ending of the video. So as you leave this message tonight, remember what you have discovered. You are not witnessing the end of a connection. You are witnessing the unfolding of a reality that is far deeper than appearances can reveal. What is impressed upon consciousness does not simply disappear. What carries meaning does not vanish because of distance. What has touched the heart cannot be erased by silence alone, and what is sustained through assumption eventually finds a way to express itself. For too long, many people have looked outside themselves for answers. They have searched for signs, searched for proof, searched for certainty in circumstances that are constantly changing. Yet the greatest certainty has never existed outside of you. It has always existed within your own awareness. The moment you understand this, everything changes. You stop asking whether you are remembered. You stop wondering whether you are valued. You stop fearing that you have been forgotten. Because you begin to recognize your true power. You realize that your reality is not being created by random events. It is being shaped by the state you consistently occupy. So choose your state wisely. Choose the version of yourself that is loved. Choose the version of yourself that is chosen. Choose the version of yourself that feels secure, valued, unforgettable, and deeply desired. Walk through life from that identity. Think from it, feel from it, live from it. And let the outer world catch up. Do not be discouraged by temporary appearances. Do not be shaken by moments of silence. Do not surrender your faith because the evidence has not arrived yet. The unseen is always preceding the seen. The inner movement is always occurring before the outer reflection appears. Remain faithful to what you have accepted within. Remain loyal to the reality you have chosen. And above all, remember this: you are not trying to become the person who is loved. You already are. You are not trying to become the person who is chosen. You already are. You are not trying to become unforgettable. You already are. The moment you accept that truth completely, the struggle ends. The waiting loses its power. And a new chapter begins to unfold naturally before you. Close your eyes tonight and rest in the feeling that it is already done. Rest in the feeling that you are already loved. Rest in the feeling that you are already chosen. Rest in the feeling that what belongs to you is finding its way to you now. And when you awaken tomorrow, do not look for proof. Be the proof. For the person who knows their wish is fulfilled no longer chases, no longer fears, and no longer doubts. They simply live in the certainty that what has been accepted in consciousness must, in its own perfect way and perfect time, become visible in the world.